Good morning, PlayStation Universe, and welcome to episode 54 of PlayStation Fix. My name is Will Robinson, and joining me, as always, is Kyle Prawl.
Hello, friend.
Oh, hello.
How you doing?
Oh, I'm doing all right. I think I'm a little tired. You hear my voice is a little scratchy, but I got some coffee to warm it up as we go,
As you do. Nice,
as you do.
soothing, warm liquid.
Yeah, yeah, that's
Moving
that's
on
exactly
from
how I
that.
refer to it.
Yeah.
So, biggest thing that we're going to talk about right away, well, Kyle's going to tackle this one more, is
Oh God.
uh, next week, finally, we get Horizon Zero Dawn. Will be hitting the store shelves everywhere, digitally and physically. And Kyle did our review for PSU, so he's got a
I
lot to
did.
say on this.
I did. I did.
We've already discussed beforehand is that I don't want any no spoilery things.
Yeah. In fact, we can. This will be an interesting thing because we want to set some boundaries, right? We want to make sure
Hmm.
that you enjoy it without like 2 hours of chatter, like going into the experience. But I'm curious, sitting where you're at, thinking about the
Hmm.
game, what do you want to know, or what are you still thinking about as we get closer and closer to Tuesday?
Sure. Well, it's thinking back on one of the trailers or whatever. Some of it was just the. I think the biggest thing for me was just like the ongoing NPC interactions, is if they're
Hmm.
really not necessarily scripted, that's not a bad thing, but if it's more like what we saw in there on one of the trailers at E3, I think last year, was I was expecting like a bar set by The Witcher that we talk about all the time. But what we saw in there looked like it was a few steps below that at that time. So that was kind of what had me worried about it. So it's just like that ongoing narrative and the ongoing mechanics and interactions in the game that if they become tiresome or more of a task to fulfill or just like more not something that you want to take the time out and talk to every single person you meet there, more as just like conduits to get you through the game.
Sure. I think it's a bit of both. Like it never is tiresome or feels gamey and mechanical where you're just going through the rote steps to activate quests because people do have interesting things to say and the game is for the most part really well written with its side content and stuff.
Hmm.
At the same time, like it is in terms of animation and exposition, I'd say it's a few steps below The Witcher. I mean, there's really nothing like where I'm sure some of The Witcher 3 is like lip sync is auto generated based on vocalization, but I it also gives off the impression that a lot of it is handcrafted, like
Hmm.
handcrafted animations and stuff. Uh, and movement, like a lot of cutscenes have movement, like people moving through a scene, or you cut to black and jump from one set to another, so to speak.
Hmm.
With Horizon, it is a lot for the most part, it's more static. I think a lot of your NPC interactions are with a person who's more or less standing in place, and there's exceptions. But so yeah, I guess I would describe it as more static, but at the same time, it is well written. And the neat thing about Horizon is that whereas with The Witcher, I mean, a fair criticism you could leverage against the game is that it can be kind of like it just dumps exposition on you at times, which is great. It helps fill out the world, but
Hmm.
some gamers might be like, okay, enough already. Like I just want to play.
Sure.
And Horizon has a deep, like a really deep and interesting lore and history, and yet it's really good at like conveying it to you quickly. Like
Oh, good.
it trusts the intelligence to you, the gamer, to recognize, oh, okay, this is this faction, and they feel this way about this other faction, without going into like three or four long-winded sentences about the history and
Hmm.
catching you up on it. Like you really can piece it together throughout the game,
Good.
pretty well.
So this is actually was something that I had a complaint in my own head when I was watching a show yesterday, was that it's an entertaining show. It just throws you into the stuff, but then like it kind of felt like they sort of cheated you on some of the stuff. Like there'd be things as like a magical world type of things that happens, but there'll be something that happens, and they're like, "How did you do that?" I don't know. Then they move on, and they don't explain it. Like they just use it as an excuse to just like they can do whatever the hell they want in this, and they don't have to explain it, which really bothers me when shows do that or any kind of fiction or whatever.
Oh,
You
absolutely.
know, so does Horizon do a good job of just like giving you at least the baseline of what you need to know to say, "Oh yeah, that makes sense in that context." type of thing.
I'd say it goes even further than that. Like the show you were describing got me thinking about our Final Fantasy 15 spoiler cast and how I think
Mm-hmm.
one of our big criticisms, and really I think everybody sort of feels this way, is that it just feels so incomplete at times, and the plot holes are so easy to point out, and there's so little explained at times that you're left with something that just feels really messy and really incoherent. Like the writers, the developers weren't thinking about, hey, what about this really obvious glaring hole? You know what I mean? Like, how does that get explained?
Yeah.
I'm so happy and satisfied to say that Horizon is like the exact opposite of that, and it's so rare in games, I feel. I mean, you've got really good examples like The Witcher tells a great story,
Mm-hmm.
and others, do a good job of walking you between like plot twist to revelation with those still feeling earned, I guess. Like they
Okay.
don't feel like totally left to field, never explained, and then you're left with questions. It's like the game almost anticipates, like really thoughtfully anticipates the questions that you're going to have as a first time user. It's like the developers didn't just take for granted that they've been immersed in this story for 5 years and then leave everybody else hanging because they can't see the forest for the trees, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Like there's moments where Aloy actually stops and sort of like just in a sentence or so, she'll like summarize what she just learned to herself, almost to like pull the real important point out of that and sort of drive it home for you, the player. And
Okay.
oftentimes I found that that was the same thing in my head where I was thinking, okay, so this means that this, and then she would sometimes like repeat almost that same line. I'm like, oh, that's just so thoughtful. So yeah, I actually would occasionally, like as I was playing, like going from quest to quest, I would sort of think about, okay, what have I learned so far? How do those things fit together? Are there any pieces in there that contradict each other? Like does the timing fit? Do the facts fit? Are there any plot holes that I can point out? And not only were there none, I mean, I would stop and think about that somewhat frequently and just never could find anything that stuck out.
Hmm.
But it does that often like in rapid succession. Like the second half of the game especially tells you a lot about the world, and it's it they just nail it like every single beat. There's never like a, oh Jesus, that came out of left field and felt really random. It's all very believable. It flows logically into
Hmm.
itself to just be this really self-contained sci-fi story, right? Without a lot of loose
Yeah.
threads, I think.
All right. Well, there's a lot of other things I do want to ask about, but first I realized we didn't even say if you could give a kind of a brief summary or setup of what Horizon Zero Dawn actually is.
Yeah,
Because we just started talking
I know.
about it, I realized that.
Speaking of taking things for granted, we're also
Yeah.
PlayStation fans. We just dive right into it.
Hmm.
Yeah, no, the 30,000 foot view is Horizon Zero Dawn is Guerrilla Games' new franchise debut in a post Killzone era, and I think once people play Horizon and really come to grips with how robust and how really amazing it is, I can't imagine many people are going to be clamoring for Guerrilla to go back to Killzone. Even as a fan, even as somebody who liked most of those games,
Hmm.
Shadowfall notwithstanding, I was all right on that. But
Yeah.
anyway, Horizon is a open world action RPG with an emphasis on action to the point where Guerrilla really took like when you think open world RPG in or really open world action, I guess, in 2016, like my mind jumps to Far Cry, my mind jumps to The Witcher.
Hmm.
These things where there's RPG trappings, but like with Far Cry especially, you can't really over level the game, right? You can't really grind out levels and beat things through sheer numbers. You do have to have like a modicum of action game skill, like
Hmm.
aiming and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Horizon is totally that way. So a really strong emphasis on tight, polished action, and Guerrilla brings its Killzone sensibilities to the table when it comes to difficulty. Horizon is a legitimately hard game
Hmm.
to the point where that's actually one of the very few cons that I note in my glowing 9.5 out of 10 review is that like it's genuinely extremely challenging. It almost feels nostalgic in the way that boss fights are like fearsome, like really memorable challenges. And yet one of the consequences of taking it that far is that you will occasionally step over the line. And I do feel like there are some encounters in the game that can feel cheap or like you
Hmm.
just don't have the tools, like Aloy just isn't equipped to deal with a situation. And often in hindsight, you can see how you could have done it better, but yet there are still like I guess as I know in the review, like if that's the price you have to pay for some of that nostalgic leg slapping frustration,
Hmm.
I'm okay with that because like generally you never take a battle for granted. It pushes you in that way. So
Cool.
yeah, open world action RPG. And I think the other main, I mean, really the the robot dinosaurs are kind of hard to gloss over.
Yeah.
That's such a huge Horizon setting, and its enemies are what really set it apart from other games. These guys, these 26 species, just present such a unique challenge. Most of them are unlike anything we've really fought in games before. They're incredibly well modeled and detailed to the point where that actually plays a role in strategy, like the type of armor they're wearing or where their armor plating is the thickest. Like that will, you can't just throw arrows at a big creature and bring it down through sheer numbers. You actually, in every case, you have to think about what arrow you're using, where you're aiming, what pieces of this machine present the biggest threat to you, and
Hmm.
really sort of deconstruct it in your mind as you're doing this super fast paced action heavy combat. That all flows really smoothly. I'll end my elevator pitch with this note, which is I think Guerrilla has really effectively boiled down the gameplay to a really tight, fast-paced, like addictive loop. Like you can go from combat to crafting to NPC to city and back out to combat all so quickly. You can feel productive and feel like you had a ton of fun with just like a 30-minute play session. And there's never like you think about something like The Witcher or Skyrim where crafting is kind of it's often trapped behind like an NPC and several menus and a bunch of interfaces where you have to figure out what you need, how much of it you need, etc.
Hmm.
It can be kind of dense. With Horizon, it's like the complete opposite of that. They boiled it down to where anytime out in the world, you can hold L1 to bring up your radial menu and craft more ammo right from that menu while the game is in slow-mo, and it's almost instant.
Hmm.
And it shows you how many more resources you have remaining. Like that's always shown to you no matter what type of ammo you're crafting. Gathering resources from the environment takes all of a half second, and it doesn't even interrupt her sprint. Like she'll briefly stop to grab it, but then as she moves again, she's sprinting. So you don't have to like constantly be clicking the left analog stick again and again or whatever. So
It's
yeah,
good.
and yeah, so all things are never more than a few clicks away, which just helps maintain like this really fast, exciting gameplay flow.
Okay. And now, without giving any details on what types of things, but is there? I know we saw a handful of different ways to engage with the creatures of the world in combat for the different weaponry and stuff. Is there a pretty big selection of that as you play through it?
Yeah, there is for sure. The weapons are kind of spread across 7 or 8 main types, and
Oh wow.
the thing that's really strong about the game too is that those 7 or 8 types, like it's man, a good RPG to compare it to in a weird way might actually be South Park: The Stick of Truth,
Yeah.
because that, if you recall from playing it, is kind of an RPG
Alloy
that
runs up and farts on our enemies.
yeah, exactly. That's weapon number 8.
Ah, yeah.
Weapon number 7 is the throwing of feces.
Yeah.
Um, it's like I saw it described by somebody online as a diet RPG, where it's an RPG that's really boiled down to its very essences. And when I think of something like South Park, it's never South Park was challenging, definitely at times, but it was never dense or overly complicated. Like you could very clearly
Hmm.
see, okay, this enemy is weak to this element, and my armor is strong against this other element. So, okay, here's what I have to do. Here's what I have to shuffle around to really triumph in this fight. And I think it's the same way there. As far as the weapons go, they really feed into that. Like I could see there's a play style where you could set down wire traps, these shock wires that sort of cross the path, and then you sort of lure the machine across that, and you've stunned him or you've set him on fire or something like that.
Hmm.
And yet, after the initial kind of first hours, I find myself going in a completely different direction. Like I often used a sling that tosses out elemental bombs, and I used a sniper arrow that has like a concussive blast that doesn't do damage, but it will almost 100% knock off a machine part with one arrow. So I kind of went in that direction, and yet I can completely see how somebody who's using those traps and those tripwires might carve out their playstyle that way, like set down a bunch of things, lure the enemy into them, and then never take any damage. So from that high level view, I can totally see how everything plays out, and yet there's definitely room in there to carve out your unique playstyle, even though it is an action game.
Okay. So when you start focusing on a specific area of play, are you locked into that for the rest of the
No,
game?
no, not at all. It's totally swappable. None of the skills in Aloy's skill trees really. It's not like Fallout where they'll amplify the damage you get from a certain kind of weapon, and you kind of have to stick with using that. The skills are more so like, hey, now you can do sneak attacks from tall grass, or now you can slow down time and concentrate when you zoom with your arrow. There's nothing that gives like a static boost to like a tripwire or a sling, so you're really like free to play around with all of them. And sometimes I do that, and then I find out that I'm kind of bad at setting traps, and I don't have a great like
Hmm.
mind for it because I haven't really been conditioned to do so. I guess it's kind of funny in that way how you can like get really really skilled at a certain kind of play, and
Yeah.
then the other types of play can seem very foreign just because you don't really know how to handle those tools.
Hmm.
And yet, I think there's definitely folks who do that. Like I read one review where the person said like melee was essential to him, and he couldn't like imagine playing the game without like a really heavy melee approach. And I'm like,
Huh.
I disagree completely. I rarely used melee because I didn't find it very powerful. Like I really relied on my different arrow types, my shock arrows, my fire arrows to get
Sure.
things done.
Hmm. How about the environments? Because what we
Oh,
saw
it's a gorgeous
basically,
game.
yeah,
I mean, it is just flat out. It is incredibly beautiful, and especially when you add in the element of it being open world, it's just like my God. There's really no. I mean, there's really no.
is there good design in it where you can take advantage of? So if you can engage with the same type of enemy in five different areas, and you can have that encounter five different ways, not counting the different weapon types.
Yeah, definitely. It's kind of geographic in the sense that some enemy types stick to their territory, so to speak. But yet, yeah, there are like a few places in the game where you could encounter a snap maw, or a few places where you could encounter a rock breaker, and the environment does matter there for sure. I think elevation plays a factor. A lot of times, you're able
Hmm.
to sort of climb a rock face or jump on top of some rocks to get above an enemy, and that can be troublesome for them. And yet at the same time, you might find yourself being beset by an airborne machine, and suddenly you've got to find like natural trees or rock faces that can create like a shield between you and them, because it might be hard to dodge or what have you.
Sure.
So yeah, the diversity definitely plays into gameplay, but almost on a subconscious level, like you don't even realize that you're like ducking behind cliff faces until now, as I kind of think about it.
Hmm.
But just geographically and visually, the game is just absolutely tremendous. Like I think you could make an argument that there are parts of Uncharted 4, like let's just take a random wall texture in Uncharted 4. Like that might, depending on the texture, depending on the situation, that might have slightly more detail than something in Horizon, but Horizon is open world and it is rendering like
Hmm.
5 square miles at a time, no matter where you go. And even despite that, there are parts of Horizon that look better than Uncharted 4. So it's really just it really boggles the mind. I think it's almost indisputable that it is just technologically the best game ever made, and it's no
Wow.
surprise why Kojima chose that engine for his future
Yeah.
project.
Well, also this game is getting a lot of praise pretty universally, not just within uh, PlayStation websites and things like that. Which, if you
Hmm.
look at the reviews that are out there, what we've got perfect scores, predominantly perfect scores through eights and nines, a random 7.5 out of 10, but that's about as low as it goes out there. But talking about Kojima, there was an Easter egg that was hidden in Horizon somewhere too, which I thought that was. How often does that happen, really? Especially anymore between completely different studios. Obviously, Guerrilla and Kojima have a pretty significant relationship now, is what you
Yeah,
said. But
I think it's happening less and less. It's kind of funny because with Gorilla, like, I mean, I could be wrong, but I don't recall any major like industry cameos or Easter eggs like in the Killzone series. It always just
Hmm.
was kind of its own self-contained thing. So I think by having this Easter egg in I don't know if we wanted to say what the Easter egg was, but by
Well, we got
having this
art. Yeah, we got. I mean, there's an article up about it on PSU. So
yeah,
if
good
you're
point.
listening to this, I'd assume you've probably seen
Yeah.
that. Which
So there's a Death Stranding Easter egg in Horizon. There's also a Killzone Easter egg that people haven't really picked
oh
up on in the same way. But yeah, it sort of is like when you have that kind of intertextual referencing from a studio like Guerrilla, it's sort of just driving home that yeah, they've like joined the PlayStation family. Not that they weren't already, but they've kind of like they're in this Naughty Dog place or they're in this Media Molecule place where they're all kind of the same PlayStation family, and they're okay with these little smiles and nods that sort of reference that in the game. So
yeah,
I thought it was a cool thing for sure.
yeah. Just having the Easter egg was basically a silhouette of the Kojima Productions helmet that you see as the new logo, and it
Yep,
was
exactly.
abandoned amulet, I think is what it's coined as in there. But
Yeah, there's a coffee mug with the Killzone logo on it too.
oh, jeez.
That's the other one.
Yeah, well, that's
So
pretty
yeah,
cool. Yeah, like last time I remember really paying attention to that, or can clearly remember that, as when it was studios like it was Naughty Dog and Insomniac back in the PS2 era.
oh yeah,
You'd
for
see the
sure.
posters of the other characters or whatever in the games, and but for developers that are completely different in what they're doing, to be kind of throwing those nods in is pretty cool, especially with getting that support with Death Stranding and stuff, or giving Kojima that full support and just saying that, like, kind of like, to me that's like a nod, like we fully expect great things from this man, so we're gonna put this
Oh, for
in our
sure.
game, which I think that's pretty universally expected. But
And now that I've like played Horizon, I know what the Decima engine looks like and plays like. It adds just even more like meaning to the fact that they handed it to him on like the flash drive, the Sword of a Thousand Truths,
yeah,
because it's already just unbelievably well optimized. I mean, the entire game is a locked 30 frames per second without any stuttering, without any slowdown of any kind, and that in a 40-hour playthrough, you might find a moment of that when special effects fill the screen or something, but it's not like games where like dips plague you, throughout the experience, and you
right.
have to kind of deal with that. But it's like yeah, it's a combination of those things. Like as an open world RPG that runs that well, I think like your preference for art styles can vary. Like somebody might say Uncharted 4 looks better, and certainly facial animation it does. Certain environments it does. But Horizon is just the freaking real deal, right? As an open world game, it's absolutely unreal. It's probably PS4's greatest technical achievement, which then makes me think, what the hell is Decima Engine going to be capable of with a Kojima game that might have more like linear components? That might just be, and maybe some open world because he kind of went into that with MGS5, but then you'll have story segments that don't take place in this massively rendered landscape. Like, what will the engine be capable of when you're like just zeroing in on a town or a city?
Hmm. Yeah, well,
Very exciting, regardless.
that's what there's a lot of things that I would want to talk about, but I feel like we're getting close to being on the edge of spoiling spoiling some of the stuff, or getting to the point where I would find out things I don't want to find out until I play it. So,
Yeah, for sure, for sure.
but it is interesting that there is another. This is just a random thing that got. I'm assuming this is just a bogus news story. Not that the reporting was, but that the original source that this was from. There was a rumor that uh, Gorilla is going back and they're making Killzone 5 or whatever now. Um,
I
I don't know.
yeah,
It said like
I
it's a Dutch news article from something where a guy just put out saying that Gorilla, where 270 people work, was acquired in 2005 by Sony. Now it is working on a new Killzone. That's it.
right,
It
right.
was just like,
Yep. Yeah, so that almost that stretches disbelief to the point of impossible. I just feel like Horizon is gonna make a seismic impact when it comes out, and people
hmm
finally get their hands on it. Like it really is the feeling of it's like the nostalgic feeling of like the first time you play like Uncharted 1 back in the day, or the first time you play Halo, or the first time you play something like this, maybe Mass Effect 1, where you're like you can almost see the franchise to come because you just can just feel how well it will resonate with people, how much it will
Hmm.
challenge them. And I think like, especially with Uncharted sort of in a way fading, like people kind of aware that it's over for the time being. Like there's this huge chance for Aloy to become the new face of PlayStation, like the new PlayStation icon that appears in posters and appears at press conferences and is like
Hmm.
the cosplay. I mean, there's already just a metric shitload of Aloy cosplay. Like Gorilla is retweeting that stuff all the time, and I'm like, God dang, the game's
Yeah,
not even out yet. How are you people nailing this look so well?
yeah. No, and it's like even just for the promotional stuff, I mean, how much clearly before any reviews got put out there, Sony was just incredibly confident in this game. Like they had
Yeah.
like you see all the costuming and all the crap that was going on at E3 and different
Oh,
places
for
like that,
sure,
where it's
yeah.
just like dedicating full areas to this game in a way
Hmm.
that doesn't happen often. So it's I don't see this if it does everything that you say it's doing and goes along with pretty much 80% of the rest of the critic industry out there. I don't see this franchise going away anytime soon. So
No doubt. And yeah, it'd be a real shame for Gorilla to go back to Killzone at this moment, I think.
yeah,
Especially since, and not even because like the story in my opinion is ripe for spin-offs or sequels. Like it's just they've almost mastered or come close to mastering this entirely different genre on their first attempt. And
hmm,
there's things they can definitely clean up. Like it game isn't perfect, and yet it's already just like dang, this was your first go? Like it
yeah.
really boggles the mind.
Well, I think that's a good place to switch off from there because, like I said, I don't want to get.
Yes,
I do want
yes.
to. I do want to get this day one now after hearing some of this stuff. That's also one of the things that I know you and I have talked about in the past on I'm not even sure if we've done it on podcast or whatever, but just the fact that Gorilla handed this game out a week in advance, or no, the review went out a week in advance,
Yeah, the game came almost 3 weeks in advance.
right? And that doesn't happen much at all anymore, from what I've
No, that's
seen.
that is true. That's definitely less and less, and especially since you consider that I played the entire game unpatched, version 1.0, and I don't recall ever encountering like an open world bug in that entire playthrough. Like it took me I don't know if you want to know how long it took me to beat the game, but in
Well, you
that
threw down 40 hours earlier.
yeah, I think that's a stretch for the main story. The main story took me a bit less, like 32, I think. But
Okay.
um but yeah, regardless, in that entire playthrough of open world questing and stuff, I never encountered a bug or a visual quirk of any kind. Now, in the time since, as I've been working on trophies, I've seen like one or two here or there, and yet this is like easily the most stable open world RPG in a decade. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
that's absolutely unheard of that there isn't just like a dragon neck expanding or whatever. Insert Bethesda example here.
Right. No, that's really cool. So I was gonna wait initially until reviews came out and heard the better judgment of the industry. I didn't realize that we were actually going to be getting the reviews out a week in advance. So
Yeah, it says a lot for
I'll be
sure.
grabbing. I'm planning on grabbing it day one so that Kyle and I eventually, and like, give myself a 2 week buffer
Yeah. Yep.
for life that's going on, and try to be. So we're planning on trying to do a spoiler cast of this later on.
Yeah, that would be great. I can't wait for that.
All right, but moving on to another action RPG, and one that we've already dropped the name of in this podcast and we've talked about many times is Mass Effect
Mm.
Andromeda. That's going to be the next big hitter that's going to be coming out later. But it's just one thing that I really like that they're doing now is that they're showing these different kind of game breakdown videos being delivered by BioWare.
Hmm.
And one of the ones that came out pretty recently we got to see how gameplay actually works. So it's just one of those weird things where it's just like we've talked about it on and off and just kind of like, yeah, we don't know much and all these things are like, oh, it doesn't look that good in some parts of it, and it's just like a lot. This is exactly what I was waiting for and what I needed, where it's just like removing a lot of that concern that I had before, and it's also making it a lot more interesting to me in terms of just how you can play this game, because the first three were a lot of fun. Well, the second two were a lot of fun gameplay wise.
Yeah.
um,
Careful, careful.
yeah, but it's like you can pick up whatever weapon you want, so you can swap out that way, or you're not locked into a certain thing. And it was like, yeah, that's okay, but from the abilities and stuff, you're pretty much set in how you play that way. This
Hmm.
one has this. Andromeda is coming out with a new way of playing where if you think of the what Mass Effect, you could control or command some of your teammates to do stuff, but in like Dragon Age you can freely swap between your different classes of people in your party or whatever. So you could have that flexibility in play style if you wanted to do that, but that also would require you from leaving your main character to learn the abilities of the other characters, and it was just a thing
Right.
where it was like you had to kind of separate yourself from your own character to do these things. But now they're creating these. It's like a quick select menu where it's you can have favorites that focus on different abilities or different loadouts that you set up, where you can have it focusing on more on soldier abilities for combat, or the bionic abilities. Is it bionic? No,
Biotic with a T,
biotic.
right?
That's the one. Yep, biotic abilities or tech.
Hmm.
And the last trailer that they came out with, they showed the basically the guy. If you switch between them, like if you do in a lot of other games, if you switch between a class or something, the abilities will have a cooldown for a little while.
Yeah.
But like the first one he showed up, he put it on where it was a sniping loadout with a cloak ability and landmines with grenades, and then he swapped to a close combat loadout where he had a shotgun out and he was fighting off against some of these other things, and he did the biotic one where he was. I'm trying to even remember what all the stuff that was going on in there, but there was like throwing out flamethrowers and cryo freezing gels and stuff, and the tech stuff, and it was just like all these different things that he did, like used about 20 different abilities or skills in the matter of like a minute or two on the same
Yeah.
fighting this bigger enemy, and it was all completely fluid. And there was and the jetpack in the game, actually I wasn't really sold on initially, but that freedom of movement and that ability to get in and out of certain instances, it looks like it's still pretty balanced where the AI is able to track you fairly well, but not to the point where it's just like totally unfair. Where it's like they're
Hmm.
constantly following you wherever you do. It'll take them a couple seconds to figure out where you are again and lock back on, but it's not like you're just completely running away from them freely and they can't hit you. So they did set a good balance for that. But yeah, it was just having that, and then also working with the squad mates that you have, where it was like I think they were referring to it as like different roles for the squad mates that you can have, where they'd be priming or detonating. And what that meant was like if your main character, like you saw a group of enemies, you throw like some kind of grenade over something at them, or like a biotic grenade where it just kind of suspends them in the air or whatever. And then I can't remember her name, but the Asari that you work with,
PB.
she can detonate, as they said, and she'll just kind of dash in and just do kind of a blast attack and
So
kill
they're
everybody in the
smart
room.
enough to like link up with the skills that you're using
Right.
in a meaningful way or an
Yeah, and
advantageous
you
way.
can you can upgrade them in a certain way to make them better at either doing the priming action or detonating, depending on how you'd want to do it. So you could actually have them set up the finishing blow for you and all that stuff.
Mm.
So just and then obviously like I forgot her name again. Sorry, she's really good more at being support. Um, Drax, I think is his name, the Krogan. He's more of obviously like a tank character, so he's good at soaking up a bunch of damage, and like so they all have their same kind of expected roles
Yeah.
in the party, but you can leverage them in different ways depending on how you spec them, and you can pretty much freely adjust your layouts and upgrades. I think is what they were saying in pretty much any way you want later on, or part of it was with the favorites and stuff, where you can just really just kind of do whatever you want. You're not locked into the same type of leveling or play style that you started doing at the beginning of the game if you want to change that around.
Yeah, which I like the freedom of that. I like the flexibility of that. I like also how some. I mean, one thing I did kind of like is that at the start of a Mass Effect game, you can sort of decide what character you're going to play, and of course, nothing's stopping you from doing that here. But just
Yeah.
there's that layer of freedom for maybe a player who maybe is a little more casual and they're going about it one way, and then they reach a fight that is really better tailored to a different kind of play style. You can swap things out if you want.
Hmm.
I was really impressed by just the depth of the skill trees, like the skill layers there,
Yeah.
and it seemed like you could really just you could you could really spec out your character in a way that was more meaningful than just picking the Vanguard or the Biotic or I'm trying to remember like the old class names, right?
Right.
Like this was far more like, okay, you've got a tech tree and there's like 13 different paths to explore here, with like 6 or 7 nodes. So
Hmm.
you can put points into where you want, and from the weapons they were showing, like you could be this really powerful biotic melee user with with an Asari sword, and you
Yeah.
charge in and do a bunch of melee strikes. Like that's kind of new for the franchise. Or and you could use the jetpack as part of that. You could use that to get airborne and rush in a little bit above the fray. You could sit back kind of tanky, like I saw that dome shield where you just really pop that up, sit behind it with your assault rifles, and sort of
Hmm.
advance slowly that way. So yeah, I definitely it did engender a lot of confidence. I think this is what we were missing from the Mass Effect, the mysterious BioWare realm, where there wasn't a lot to go on for this game, and we didn't know in what ways they were innovating the formula. And I think the takeaway for me is they're not so much. I guess they're definitely innovating, but they're not dramatically upheaving.
Yeah.
This is definitely the Mass Effect you recognize, and it seems more thoughtfully constructed with regard to playing the style you want to play.
Yeah. And I mean, it's basically what you said. This is what was missing, especially for me, and just also being on kind of going through the Dragon Age games, where it's like Dragon Age compared to Mass Effect is like extremely limited to me, and the combat or how it feels to play, because you're restricted unless you pick like a mage or something. I mean, BioWare's combat shines brightest in Mass Effect, where it's got the ranged abilities, it's got the different things that you can layer on top of each other in real time with the different, like throwing a grenade on top of shooting and taking cover and all these things. And where BioWare or with the Dragon Age games, to me, while they're fun and they're entertaining, it's just more like button mashy to me, and it's not like this is what I was waiting for and what I wanted. And it's been a long time since I played Mass Effect 3, where it was like, this is okay now I'm totally sold on jumping back into this type of world. And
Hmm.
something that helps onto that too, where we talked about with basically the star power that Kojima has been able to get with Death Stranding just so far before we even know what the game is about, is that the last week or so we've seen more of these types of videos or interviews and things with people that are working on the game, and one of them is that the Asari doctor in the game is voiced by Natalie Dormer,
Hmm.
and just how hearing her talking about the game too, where it's just like she's just in awe of how professional and how at the top of the level each person is working at BioWare in their field, and just seeing that recognition from people. I don't know if she's a gamer or not, but I mean, I just to see that crossover more of like the professional acting world. Not that voice actors in games aren't professional actors. I'm not saying that by any means, but traditional like shows and movie actors have been traditionally separated from
Yes.
that realm to video game actors.
Hmm.
But seeing that crossover and that mesh and that understanding of like, wow, these are real, like these are real acting jobs or like
Yeah,
real things that are have so much care behind them and so much effort put into them. Just that it's another instance where it just kind of seems like the last year or so has been more of a renaissance for, or starting for that. We're getting real, not real. I keep saying real, but getting
traditional actors.
traditional actors, yeah, or actors from traditional worlds coming over into the rising acting world more so is video games.
Yeah, I think it's like impossible for them to ignore at this point how the stories and universes of video games engender the same passion that a really great traditional story like your Game of Thrones or your Breaking Bad would engender in its fan base. I think all it takes is for one actor of somewhat prominence to sort of sit down with a developer and see the arc of the story and where characters come and go, see like the design docs behind it to realize, oh, okay, there's a whole like there are narrative teams, like there's real creative direction behind this. This isn't time wasting. This is a different media experience, and maybe maybe I'm looking for a change of pace. Maybe I've been in television for a decade now, and I want to give this a try. I think that's what you're starting to see, and then word starts to spread, and then you do get a renaissance, like you said.
Yeah, so that's just another thing where I was just really excited to see that type of stuff happening across multiple games now, kind of in the last year or so, and just and again seeing that Mass Effect is. I don't know if. Well, it'll depend largely on once we play through this one, but if we feel that it's almost certainly. Well, no, they said they're moving on to a brand new IP after this, but to see if the fan base would demand a fifth Mass Effect entry after something like this, where
Mm.
I don't know if it's from what I'm seeing at this point, like you said, it's not necessarily reinventing anything, but it's definitely putting another extra polish on what was already there.
Yeah, for sure.
So,
It's an interesting thing because I think they probably, I mean, most people are assuming that this is the start of a new trilogy or a new series of some kind. I
mhm,
mean, that's why else would you reboot the series with a different story at a different time on a new generation, right?
right.
And like, and yet I think part of what made every Mass Effect entry exciting, besides the fact that your choices and your character development carried over, was that there was sort of a like you look at where we started with Mass Effect 1 to where we ended up Mass Effect 3 gameplay wise, every game was a sort of a dramatic innovation and you never knew what BioWare was going to do to shake up the formula or make things more polished. You know, you had the Mako in Mass Effect 1 and that was basically reduced to scanning planets for resources. So
Hmm.
what's interesting about Andromeda is that you're sort of starting from in theory the peak of your game. I mean, this is a decade's worth of design decisions kind of coming together in what they hope is the best version yet. So where do you go from here, right? Is Mass Effect 5 whatever going to be like, is it going to come out sooner because the gameplay is essentially unchanged and it's just another story episode?
Hmm.
Or do they take the same amount of time to maybe redefine what Mass Effect means from a gameplay perspective, but then that's kind of maybe not the safest way to go because then you run the risk of people being like, well, what the hell? I
Hmm.
made my character in the context of an RPG, and now it's like almost action adventure, so that would definitely turn some people off. It's just very curious. I don't know where this is going to go.
No, yeah, but in the meantime, I'm now fully on board to looking forward to this game
Hmm.
once it comes out. So,
Yeah, man, for sure.
gosh,
Me as
yeah,
well.
I got
It's a
Horizon. I gotta get through Horizon. I gotta get through Mass Effect.
Persona
Persona
comes out like a
5's.
week later.
Yeah, God. All right. But you said before we started, you said you had an interesting topic that you had for your second one. So,
Yeah, yeah, I did. Let's dive into that. So I'm gonna drop a link in our chat channel here just to make sure you've got an eye on the same visual as me.
oh, all right. Ooh,
Um, yeah,
what
ew,
is
you saw
this?
the.
Okay.
So I want to talk about the story that came out about a week ago about Sony filing a patent for a new handheld that looks a lot like a Nintendo Switch.
Jeez, is
Um,
this the real patent picture?
if you scroll down,
Yeah.
yes,
Oh,
that is real
interesting.
from the patent. So Maybe we'll have, I don't know, we could throw up a little image of it in the thumbnail perhaps or something. But yeah,
Yeah.
so I'm going to quote from Digital Trends here. I think they've got a really nice write up on the whole thing. But essentially, Sony has filed a patent for what looks to be a new portable handheld system, and it looks like it has taken quite a few design cues from the Nintendo Switch. NeoGAF user Pompo is the one who spotted the patent. It was apparently filed in 2015, but has just recently become public. And then we look at the image itself. So, as a visual description, you can imagine the Nintendo Switch with its two Joy-Cons, its two controller units on the side of a large screen, and except this is traditional Sony. So there's a D-pad. The left analog stick is slightly southeast of that D-pad, and then on the flip side, you've got the face buttons with a right stick exactly where you'd expect it. And it looks like it might have some kind of contoured, like ergonomic, like it might even be rubber texturized. Like I can imagine, Will, that piece of that is sort of rubberized where you would hold the controllers.
Hmm.
And there's like a tablet screen in between them. And what's interesting is that according to Digital Trends here, while the tablet might resemble a phone, the patent photos suggest that very little, if any, parts are removable. So visually, it looks a lot like the Nintendo Switch, but apparently the patent doesn't suggest the controller elements being removable, although like it really, really looks like they are.
Yeah.
So maybe it's just not detailed in the patent, but that, I mean, that clearly seems to be the intention. Like the tablet sort of comes to a head and then gets narrower. Then there's like an extension piece, and then the controller like literally looks slotted into it. Like the analog sticks especially have like a weird ridge around them that suggests a connection. But regardless, major surprise. Obviously, this is really coming out of left field when we consider that the PlayStation Vita probably sold enough to be profitable, but it was abandoned by Sony just a few years into its life cycle. And despite clamoring from PS Vita owners, it really never received the kind of first party or third party support that the PSP did. So I think a lot of us had assumed that this was it for Sony handhelds, and yet here we are, 2015, with a patent for something that looks really cool. So this raises the question in my mind, if Sony were to make a Vita successor, what would you want to see be a part of that Vita successor? What do they need to improve on for your own experience as far as PS Vita's successor is concerned?
First party games.
That would be nice.
That's pretty much
That'd be killer.
just the baseline. They need to have
Well, so this
studios
really like
they need to make studios excited to make games for it. That's the biggest
yeah,
thing.
no doubt about it. That's critical. Like there just never was that. I think, the limited install base didn't help. I don't think the Vita sold incredibly well out of the gate because at
Hmm.
that like it wasn't like the PSP where a handheld PlayStation console on the back of PS2 was like, oh my God, what?
Right.
And it was novel. It was brand new. That was a totally foreign concept. But this was the second run out, and it's like, okay, people know what this is. A lot of people are just now at that time getting their PS3s a few years into that life cycle.
Right.
So
They
yeah,
can't bite off more than they can chew, and they can't essentially lie to the public on what it's able to do.
I
Which,
love.
ugh,
Yeah, no doubt about it. There's it was hyped big out of the gate. May do on some of those promises. I mean, remote play ended up working
yeah,
pretty
but the
well.
biggest one was you can play console quality games on the go with the
Yeah,
Vita. And it's like, no, you
for sure.
can't. You console quality meaning like PS2 console quality,
Yeah, no doubt.
but
Well, so that raises an interesting thing now because the Nintendo Switch is literally console quality on the go. I mean, you play
yep,
Zelda Breath of the Wild
that
at
looks so
900p on your
good.
TV, and then it's 720p when you take it on your handheld, and it has like a 3-4 hour battery life. It's exactly what you would expect.
Yeah,
Like literally console games with all the controllers that you expect. So now we're in a weird situation because I want that from Sony. Like I want to be able to play Horizon Zero Dawn or what have you with no remote play lag. Just here's the game, it's native, it has the full control scheme, and I can walk around my house with it, or I can take it on a plane and use a little kickstand to set it up on the tray and play for 4 hours. But the problem is that the baseline of PlayStation console games is so much higher than Nintendo's baseline
Right.
to make that almost impossible. Like if you imagine this being a literal Nintendo Switch, this picture we're looking at, you can't possibly fit the GPU and the CPU that are required to run Horizon into this tablet unless it's like 10 inches big, and we just don't know that from the picture.
Hmm.
So there's that want there, there's that need to have that real constant quality experience, and yet when you're operating on such a higher technological benchmark than your competitor, it's much harder to make that happen because
Right.
of those components mean.
Well, that's what you'd always be fighting against, the mental disconnect of a consumer, where it's just like I'm you could do console quality games on the go for the most part, depending on if the technology's there for that. But what that would mean is basically it would be like twice as much as what a normal console would be.
Hmm.
But you get the average consumer saying, "Hey, this is smaller. Why am I paying more for it?"
Mm. Yeah,
Like
it's very true.
this isn't this isn't as big as that other thing, so why am I paying twice as much for something that's not as big? And it's
The
like, no, that's not how
PS4,
that works. It's like
right,
it's more
exactly.
advanced technology that is making it smaller. That's why you're paying more, but nobody's going to want to pay more for a portable thing, even though people are already paying 700 whatever $800 for a phone, but it's
Yep,
being
true enough.
broken up for monthly payments or things like that. So if you wanted to do something like that, you'd have to almost have to do it that way, where it's a monthly payment type of thing and set up a whole nother structure. I don't know, but
Oh, like maybe, yeah, like a
like if you had, so there's no way they would outsource it anywhere else. But I mean, like if you had a thing where it's like you subscribe with on your PlayStation account or something, get this you can get this device and make monthly payments on it through your PlayStation Plus subscription or something. It adds on. I don't something like that would make it more manageable for people, but nobody's going to be
sure.
walking out paying $800 for a portable device for the
Yeah,
most
no
part.
doubt.
So
I mean, there's another option for making those games run on a device like this while still keeping it in line with consumer expectations is, Sony has sway over its first party studios to the point where, they can say, like, hey, Gorilla, hey, Media Molecule, you need to bump up the PS4 Pro version of this game to be in 4K with higher texture detail and whatever. It's not too outlandish to think that they could say, okay, for Uncharted: The Lost Legacy, or by the time this thing comes out, I don't know, Horizon 2 or something, how about developing a version of it with far less texture detail? Like Aloy's cloth maybe moves more simplistically, maybe less of the world is rendered at once, and so it does actually run on a device like this because you're essentially changing it from
hmm
ultra settings on a PC to low settings on a PC, and the consumers like you just have that expectation. Like, yeah, that's awesome. I can play Horizon on the go. It's very responsive. It feels like I'm playing the actual game. It's just, it looks worse. And I can deal with that because I'm on a plane playing Horizon.
yeah,
That's another route, but it requires, just enforcing that, I guess, with your
yeah.
first party teams. And
That's
then
what I
you
was
still
just
have to get third party people to make games for it.
yeah. I mean, I agree with that being a just being something that you accept for that type of game, but I think there's a way too big of a audience out there that they would berate the Sony for releasing inferior games out for a I mean even the Switch is getting flack for that
Mm.
compared to like I think Zelda runs a little bit better on the Wii U or something than it does on Switch or it's like some way like that where it's like people are already like criticizing that, which is again I think that's just a very minor core group of people that are out there, but for something like that where it's like does certain games is like you can't lower the visuals as much or they'd have to be very very particular in how they adjusted it.
Yeah, I mean, the
But
only other approach that I see, which is radically different, is something like the NVIDIA Shield or a Steam machine where
hmm,
you've got a desktop computer in your house that's well equipped. It can run, games pretty well. And with Steam and Valve's just, you know, incredible server technology, you can stream that game and almost have it feel one to one like anywhere in your house.
Yeah.
And it plays so well because they have invested so much into streamlining their networking, whereas Sony has not.
Yeah.
But if we think about the next generation of Sony, like maybe there is a big push there where we're going to have Valve quality servers. Maybe some of our exclusive games will be playable on a computer through like a Sony, like something like a Steam Lite, like a Steam that's just for PlayStation exclusives, like an EA Origin. And
Hmm.
here's the device that lets you, okay, great, now you can move around your house and play it in different rooms. So maybe I mean, you have to reframe the expectations entirely. Like Digital Trends and everyone else describes this as the new Sony handheld, but maybe it isn't. Like maybe it's an accessory that's just part of a much bigger picture.
Yeah. I don't know. I just I just think that this isn't gonna. They're just gonna completely not worry about handhelds for a while, which I don't think they should. I think they've got too much momentum and they've got a lot going on with PlayStation 4 and the huge response they're getting from it. And I mean, they're already sinking a lot into having three different versions of it on the market at this moment, which I
Right?
don't
That's true.
understand that. But and it's same with the PlayStation VR, which we actually haven't heard a lot about
Yeah, it's been
in a
kind of under the
while. It's
radar.
been
Like
kind of
Resident Evil was the most recent thing to make
right.
waves, but
But just even
um,
hearing general industry reaction to it or like consumer reaction, I haven't really heard that much. And part of it is that it's still extremely highly priced
yeah,
as a just a general addition to a game system. But I think they've got too much on their plate right now, where it's just like they're in a good place, and I don't want them to spread themselves too thin.
hmm
So I don't know. I think it would be an interesting thing. It's not. It can't. It's not going to be happening. But I mean, if you did have this extra device that could leverage off of PC power, like if you were on a plane, you have a decently powered laptop, you could essentially kind of connect it to your laptop and use that, leverage that extra processing power to
sure,
make the game
something,
look a little better. But
or maybe it's like, hey, here's, you can, maybe it's a handheld where we make dedicated games for it. Maybe there's like BioShock Miniature or whatever that
yeah,
BioShock game that never happened. But then you can,
yep,
or it specializes in remote play, and we're upgrading our servers to make that remote play experience almost the same quality as like Steam in-home streaming. But if you want to download like a reduced settings local version of your favorite games to take in a place with no internet or take while traveling, you can do that too. I mean, these are things that there's just no precedent for, so it's kind of hard to speculate.
yeah, yeah. I think it's interesting. I mean, like the picture's interesting. I don't think I'm sold on that design at all.
It
But
does look more comfortable in the Vita. Yeah, I'm not sold on the design and aesthetically how it looks, but I love the idea of like just like for God's sake, let's have a handheld that doesn't
right,
like cramp my hands in 30 minutes.
yeah, this doesn't. I mean, just the shape of it doesn't look super portable to me, or
Also
easily
true.
portable. So it's
Yeah.
I don't know. But yeah, I mean, they put the patent in 2015. So what it said, and having this concept picture figured out already, I mean, must have meant that they put a decent amount of effort into R&D already, just
And
to
in
get the general
theory,
design out.
independently of the Switch as well, since it
Yeah,
doesn't really make sense that they would have seen that and then developed this with the timing of it.
right. No, I'm sure that there was always a core team at Sony that handhelds are at the forefront of their mind, so they're always
hmm
working on stuff like this. But yeah, I don't know. I think that it's not the time for them to try to do something like that. Especially with the
Sure.
Switch, I'd let the Switch kind of test the waters in that right and see how things go that way. And
Yeah, if it sells bananas, then 2 years later, Sony's like, all right, great, we have the same thing. And PlayStation fans are like, yeah,
yeah,
we've
pretty
been
much.
waiting.
Yeah, or if you did actually release it in tandem with the PS5,
hmm
so that you have it's not this weird kind of like in between technology gap that they had with like PS3 and then Vita, and then oh, PS4 is out. Oh, we got to try to make that work with this system now too, which is totally different from the PS3. And it's like
Yeah, definitely.
release them at the same. Maybe it doesn't have to be the same time exactly, but release them in the same window and have them be strictly compatible with each other.
Boy, it'd be interesting if like their vision for PS5 was something where it's not a
Just a
dramatic leap.
handheld.
Yeah, or yeah, like something like the Switch where you can dock it. Yeah, right. It'd be great to have something like that where it's like, okay, we've got PS4 or slightly higher than PS4 specs because we're already satisfied with what our developers can do here. And by the way, it's also completely portable. You can plug it into your TV when you're at home, but like, yeah, I don't know. I don't know that I want that actually.
No, yeah,
I want a marquee PlayStation 5 that just knocks my socks off. So
yeah.
who knows, man? It is weird though, and very hard to guess what's in the hopper with this one.
Guess what's in the box?
Yeah. What's in the
Um,
box?
yeah. Well,
Well, that's all I got on
yeah. Well, we hit just about an
Sony
hour
Switch.
there. I do kind of want to just mention this because I think it was interesting that we finally got actually got detail or heard, it's the first time we've heard from Ken Levine in a long time is that they got unveiled a new studio,
Oh yeah, I saw that.
Ghost Story.
Hmm.
So another one where we've heard him talk about this the same message that he's had for a while where he's talking about they want to make story-driven games and not necessarily like Titanic blockbusters all the time, but they want to build games that the story is the focus, and you get as much out of the story, if not more, than the actual game itself
Hmm.
or the gameplay of it. So
Yeah, I think the job listings. I did explore their website a little bit, and that was pretty interesting. Like one thing they say is they flat out say on the website, our new game should have strong appeal for fans of BioShock.
yeah,
Which leads you to think, okay, the narrative, first person, really deep on atmosphere, like that's definitely a focus. And then I think I was browsing through the job listings maybe, and they mentioned somebody with experience in first person level design or something to that effect. So,
hmm
which would be great with me. I mean, I'm actually really happy about that because I think like Ken Levine is a very talented creator, but we almost didn't get enough time with him before Irrational sort of folded. Like you got BioShock Infinite, that's great, and we know what his sensibilities are.
hmm
Um, just narrative heavy first person games that often have a thematic statement, sometimes a political statement.
yep,
So honestly, I want more of that. I think his take on like and today the spiritual successors are like Dishonored, System Shock 3 is being worked on. So there's still that ethos there in the game
hmm
industry today, but his take on it and his like he has the chance to become a auteur in my mind, the same way Kojima is an
right.
auteur. Uh,
Yeah, he's
he
very
just has to
much
get there.
like he's very much the original, where the others just kind of feel like knockoffs. Is
Yeah,
kind
I
of
would
how
say
I
so.
see it. It's just like,
Sure.
and he, like you said, it was just like we didn't. I wanted more, and we didn't get that until now. Hopefully, it just really feels like he's got so much left to present the gaming industry with just like
Mm.
some crazy ideas that are really cool.
Hmm.
So I'm just yeah, it's just wanted to mention that we don't really know anything beyond that apart saying that they want to make cool games. So,
Yep.
but I thought another thing that was kind of cool is that they were using all of the same social media accounts and stuff that they had for BioShock or for Irrational. So if you were following the Irrational games, you're already following them.
Hmm.
So I thought it was just kind of a fun thing where they didn't have to make a new thing. But
I'm very excited. I think
Ghost
we'll.
Story is an interesting choice for name and a little
Yeah,
campfire log logo.
I thought the logo is pretty cute.
Yeah.
It's sort of to me it conjures the image of just very classical storytelling. Like you think of a ghost story around a campfire,
Yeah.
and a one that's really well done is going to be one that just really nails all the narrative beats. Like has that 3x structure, has really interesting characters, and Horizon really cemented this in my mind. Is that like despite there not being great examples of that in recent years, like I mean, your Far Cry games usually have terrible endings, and your Final Fantasy 15 has all of its plot holes and stuff.
Yeah.
But when a game really nails all the elements of story that you expect and desire, and it just you walk away from it being completely satisfied, like, that's a really incredible feeling. And I didn't realize how rare that feeling had become until I played Horizon. I was like, damn, a game hasn't made me feel like this in quite some time. And actually, one of the
Hmm.
most recent ones to give me that feeling was Bioshock Infinite. So yeah, I love that to me, Ghost Story conjures that image of like, let's get back to our roots. Let's remind people that games can have really great stories first, and then gameplay that measures up to that.
Yeah. So I'm can't wait to see more on that. But I just wanted to mention that before we went on because I thought it was pretty interesting. So
Yeah, no doubt.
all right. Well, this has been episode. What did I say? 54? Yeah,
Yes,
episode
sir,
54 of
54.
PlayStation Fix. Uh, be sure to check out Kyle's full Horizon Zero Dawn review at
Yep.
psu.com. Get some of your required reading done before the game hits on Tuesday.
If that review doesn't hype you for the game, nothing will.
But yeah, you can find that all your PlayStation news and reviews and features and etc. on PlayStation Universe, psu.com. Uh, be sure to like, follow, subscribe on PS YouTube, our YouTube channel. Uh, Twitter, we got PSUDOTCOM, so it's at PSU.com, all spelled out there. You can find PlayStation Fix on our YouTube channel. You can find it on SoundCloud. You can find it on iTunes. Please leave reviews, comments, whatever. Like our
Hmm.
stuff on there so we know what we can do to improve the show for you guys out there. Uh, and yeah, like I said, we hopefully can power through Horizon, get a spoiler cast going.
Yeah,
I'm
man, I can't wait. That should be
I'm really
great.
looking forward to that.
I think a
Uh,
lot of people at PSU are going to be playing it, so we might be able to bring in some friendly faces to join us.
mm, yeah, that could be good. Make it just like a 3 hour podcast.
Just like Metal Gear.
Yeah. Oh my God, that was an intense conversation. But yeah, we'll be looking forward to that. I'm looking forward to the game. I can't wait to get my hands on it. So thanks again for listening to this episode, you guys, and we'll see you all in the next one. Take care.
Cheers.